All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Danger Ranger podcast. This is episode 35, and today we're going to be talking about Darby Phase of Ranger School, kind of what happened to me at Darby Phase, and kind of just, general overview of what that's going to look like for dudes who are going to Ranger School, dudes that want to know kind of more about it. So Darby Phase is the crawl phase of Ranger School. In the Army, you have this terminology of crawl, walk, run, right? So Darby's the crawl. It's kind of where you're getting your toes into the water of small unit tactics, and how they like to see you do them at Ranger School. And it is held at Fort Benning, Georgia. So after you pass RAP Week, which if you haven't checked out the video on RAP Week, go check that out, which is the Ranger Assessment Phase, basically a bunch of physical events to make sure that you're of the minimum physical ability to continue on through Ranger School and to be able to meet the physical demands that it requires, because it is a very physically demanding course. So after you finish RAP Week, the first thing you guys are going to do is, if you're airborne qualified, you'll potentially participate in an airborne operation. Immediately following that airborne operation, you'll be trucked out to Camp Darby itself, which is in the back sticks, the back 40, if you will, of Fort Benning. And this is where you're going to be kind of living for the next, I can't remember exactly how long Darby Phase lasts. But what it is it's basically a series of roll-up storage units, as well as there's one large building that's kind of the I don't remember what they call it. It's like the central command, if you will, of the notional operations you're going to be running. So you're going to have the backside providing RTO service, and they're going to be receiving your radio transmissions as you're doing your operations and your missions out in the field. Pretty barren place. There's a bunch of bays. There's planning bays, and there's like classroom bays where you're going to be getting instruction from the RI on specific battle drills, specific tactics they want to see you using. So a lot of the stuff that we've kind of been discussing and going over in our lethality series. So how to cross an open danger area, how to conduct an ambush, how to conduct a squad size recon, which we haven't done a recon video yet. And then like doing like react to contact kind of style stuff. So it's like a big kind of open field where you will be sleeping. You'll be sleeping either on the rocks by the roll-ups or out kind of beyond the roll-ups, depending on which company you're with. And then you have the planning bays. So the planning bays are like kind of like classroom settings. There's chalkboards all around the walls. It's like a 3-walled structure, and you have a sand table for your terrain models. You have they're called 20 boards, and it's basically like just a one picture overview of specific actions and battle drills that you're going to be expected to perform, such as, react to indirect fire, all crossing an open danger area, crossing linear danger areas, that kind of stuff. And then you have like a little sand area outside that you'll do your layouts. So you get to Darby Phase, right? And the first couple of days are instructional periods, and you're going to be doing the Darby Queen obstacle course. So the Darby Queen obstacle course is a pretty fun obstacle course, to be honest. I actually quite enjoyed it. It was a ball smoker, but it was quite enjoyable. And you basically, it's like, I think about a mile long and full of obstacles. I think there's like 20 or so obstacles, and you do it with a partner. So the partner's coming, keeping pace with you the whole way. You do it with your 2-quart, you do it with in your fatigues, you don't do it in a PT uniform. And in between the obstacles, if you're towards the back of the pack that's starting, you will be doing PT with the RIs. So the RIs are going to be having you doing air squats, push-ups, a bunch of silly stuff while the obstacles are being performed, if there's ever like a backup on an obstacle. And I believe when I went through, if you had 2 attempts at each obstacle, and if you failed it on the second attempt, you went on to the next one and you got a major minus. So if you've got more than 3 major minuses, you're technically going to recycle. However, they do kind of, depending on your performance throughout Darby Phase and throughout all the phases, this applies as well. If you do well, they can kind of just ignore and don't really care too much about the major minuses. But if they were serious, major minuses, safety violations, that kind of thing, then they will add up and they will kind of come back to bite you in the ass. So you'll do your Darby Queen, and then from there you're going to continue to get more classes. I think it's like 2 or 3 days worth of classes. Then you get your first mission, you get your first planning packet. And when I went, you would go out into the field for 3 days, come back for a rest and refit, and then go back out for another 3 days. From what I understand right now is what they're doing is you do a mission and then you come back. So you're not actually staying out in the woods. Current Ranger School graduates or recent Ranger School graduates, correct me if that's still the case, or if it's not the case rather. But when I went through, we were doing 3 days in the field, 1 day back, 3 days in the field. So you have 6 days in total to get your go. You'll typically get 2 looks, one in the first 3 days and one in the second 3 days. And if you're a PL infantry type officer, you'll probably be put into a planning role or a squad leader role. Typically, if you're lower enlisted, the RIs won't usually give you a planning role just because they understand like, hey, like we want to see an actually good op order, actually a good frago, and they won't put you in that role. That is not necessarily the case. I know that there's been bat boys who've gone through who got a squad leader planning look, and they basically had to enlist the help of the officers in their squad to help them, come up with the full order, the full 5-paragraph order, and then present it, which can be a little demanding of a Ranger private, as that's not something that we do in regiment. Like the privates aren't planning missions, so they typically don't really understand the whole planning process and kind of all the key points you got to hit. You do get classes on it. However, you're struggling to stay awake in those classes. And for most people, it's the first time I've ever heard to plan an op order or, conduct the planning in the way that the RIs want to see it. So be aware of that. If you are, Ranger private going into Ranger school, make friends with the officers. Yeah, they're kind of fucking nerds in a lot of cases. A lot of them are really cool. Don't get me wrong. But you definitely need to have officers in your court in case you ever get stuck with a planning look, because that will be a very difficult look for you to pass if you don't have help. So you'll do your planning in these planning bays for the first day. You'll brief the mission, and then typically you'll load up, depending on where your first objective is, you're going to load up on trucks and then infill from there. So you'll load up on trucks. Sometimes you'll do a helicopter insertion. It really depends on what kind of air assets that 4th RTB has on hand and is able to have you do. I think I did 1 helicopter insertion in my Darby phase. I did 2 Darby phases, a recycled. I did a second one. My first Darby phase, I want to say, Bravo team leader planning. So I was in charge of making sure we had all the ammo distributed, making sure everyone's layouts were kind of good to go. Think of the Bravo team leader in Darby as kind of like the platoon sergeant. Like you're kind of in charge of and responsible for accountability. I mean, that's the squad leader's role, of course, overall, but you're helping him with accountability. You're helping him with the like the resupply requests, helping distribute ammo, making sure you have accountability of all your equipment, making sure it's distributed properly, and the people that need to carry something on a certain day carry that. So like machine guns or like the AT4 or Claymore, you kind of keep track of who has what, and make sure they maintain accountability of that throughout your look. And so typically if you're in the planning phase, you'll do the planning, whether that's in the field or whether that's back at Camp Darby. You'll do the planning, and then you'll go out on your mission, and you'll typically, every single time, you're going to do a react to contact. So you'll run into some kind of contact early on in the mission. You'll execute, you'll do your react to contact battle drill, and then afterwards the RI is going to stop you. He's like, all right, cool. We're going to do a leadership handover. So leadership handover happens after the initial react to contact. So that's what you're graded on. You're graded on like whatever planning responsibilities you have, the ORP or squad patrol base rather, the actual navigation. So you will get map checked and such. And then as well as like actions on. So typically they're looking at 3 or 4 different grading criteria that they're specifically looking for. And then of course they're looking for everything else, discipline, using proper movement techniques, using proper formations, maintaining discipline, maintaining noise and light discipline. And then they'll do the handover. So the handover happens, you do it out in the field. You have like a brief amount of time to switch over any kind of needed pieces of equipment. So like if you were a saw gunner in the morning, you might get called for a look later on in the afternoon. You're going to pass your saw off to one of the guys coming off of their look. And then in the case of like the squad leader, you're going to get your rate, and all of them, you're going to have radios. All the leadership roles are going to have radios. So you're going to pass your radio off. You're going to pass your map off. You're going to give them a handover of like, hey, here's the mission. Here's what we're doing. Here's where we're going. And you're going to go from there. So the second part of the day is going to be a new group of leadership. So new squad leader, new team leaders, and you're going to finish out and carry out the initial mission. So it'll be actions on, navigation, potentially post-assault procedures, and then actually getting to your squad ORP or patrol base rather, and setting up for the night. So you're getting graded on kind of the similar criteria as you were in the first part of the day. So my first look was the Bravo team leader planning. Did pretty good at the planning, helped out with that, and then react contact. I don't remember what happened with our react contact, but regardless, say I didn't get a go on that one. And then I think my next look was Alpha team leader. I want to say it was actions on for an ambush. So it was the second part. It was like the second or third day of our last 3-day field event. Failed that look. I was with my buddy, Devin Kuhn, rest in peace, former 275 Ranger, who was killed in training like a year after. But we were team leaders together for our last look on that. He was in my squad. We had a pretty stacked squad. We had a bunch of BRC recycles in our squad, and they were ready to get done and get out of there. So they were pretty helpful. And then we had a decent slew of officers. One of the things I remember from my first Darby was I got a pretty gnarly ingrown toenail. And like I found it after I'd already been told that, hey, you didn't get your go. So that was pretty crushing. Got told I got a no-go and I was recycling, and then I had to go and get my toenail dug. I didn't get it removed, but they dug it out and had me soak it for a little bit. But pretty disheartening start to my Ranger school experience. I was like, I'm going straight through. I'm going to go straight through and get on the deployment that my platoon's going on, and then recycle. I was like, okay, like we're still good. Like we could still make deployment. We just can't recycle anymore. And then I classed up a week later with the next class. So typically as a recycle, you're not going to have to redo either the airborne operation if you're airborne qualified. And then we also didn't have to redo the Darby Queen. So all the guys that had been, that came in with that new class, I started with 617. So the next class was 717. And we didn't have to do the Darby Queen. And then we were just, integrated into the new squad and continue the mission. Started in Charlie Company, recycled out of Charlie Company, went to Alpha Company. Great group of guys. One of my buddies from my platoon actually was in that company with me. There'll be some funny stories of him in mountains. And my first look in my second phase of Darby was a Bravo team leader actions on for recon. So the recon, because we haven't really talked about it, basically you set up an ORP, and then key leaders will go out and conduct reconnaissance on an objective. You're not actually going to hit it. You're just doing reconnaissance. You're kind of like drawing sketches, finding out how many men are on the objective, what kind of equipment, weapons, what kind of uniforms they're wearing, and then coming back. So your role as a Bravo team leader in the ORP is maintaining security, having a really good sector sketch drawn out, and basically keep holding the line and not getting compromised while the recon party is out conducting their reconnaissance. So I lucked out on that one. That was a pretty good look to get. And it was early on. It was within, I think, the first day or two. So the boys weren't too worn out yet. Funny, during this mission, I actually ended up finding $100 bill out in the freaking woods. It was a little bit ate up, but it was like one of the newer $100 bills. So it was like during an LDA crossing. We crossed to the other side. I take a knee by a tree, and there's just this $100 bill sitting there. I'm like, I'll take that as a sign of good luck, and it ended up being a pretty good lucky day. My next look was Alpha team leader for planning. So I was planning the route, building the terrain model inside the squad patrol base, and we ended up going out and doing pretty well. I don't think I got a go on that one, but I didn't really mind too much as I had my go. I can't remember exactly why I failed that look, but we had our squad. So throwing it back, our squad, we kind of nicknamed ourselves the Big Dick Squad because within the first 3 days, everyone that had a look got to go. So we were crushing it. Like we were all pretty motivated. We had a couple guys. We had an E4 from the 101st. We had an E5 from the 101st. You had me. I was the only bat boy in the squad. We had a private from the 10th Mountain down in Louisiana. And then we had a bunch of officers. And then I take it back. So there was one other 175 guy with me. He might have been 275. I do not recall at this point, but it was another bat boy in the squad. And then we had, I think, another lower enlisted from, I can't remember the unit. But this guy was not very good. And we ended up getting him his go on the last day. It was a squad recon again. And he was the Bravo team leader. So we were all helping him out and get his go. But we ended up peering him because this is brutal. This is absolutely brutal to think back on. But we ended up peering him because he was the worst out of the squad. Like, what can we say? Like, everyone else was pretty squared away, pretty good. He was just the weakest link, unfortunately. But everyone in that squad ended up getting their go, which was pretty cool. So we all moved on the mountains together. The biggest takeaways from Darby and for guys that are going to school is, ideally have the basics, like read the Ranger handbook. It really is kind of a meme, like go read your Ranger handbook. But you really should have at least a foundational understanding of like the simple shit you're going to be graded on. So linear danger areas, like how to cross those properly, how to freaking react to contact. It's really simple. And just being able to adapt on the fly. You're not doing crazy long movements in Darby phase. Like your movements are max like 5 miles, and that's like pushing it. Like it's rare that you're going to have a movement that's as long as 5 miles. It might be spread out throughout the entire day, but typically your movements are pretty short. The land nav in Darby phase is pretty easy to do. The terrain is pretty easy to read, and the roads are all pretty well marked, so you're able to orient off the roads, off the terrain. There is an interesting terrain feature that you'll encounter that's not on your maps called an erosion ditch. And I don't know how it happens. I'm not a freaking geologist or a environmentalist, but they're basically just these huge ditches that aren't marked on your map, and you can walk off them in the night. So RIs kind of know the general area. It's like right outside Camp Darby where there's some pretty big ones. But if you have to cross one of those, it's a huge pain in the ass. I remember we had to cross one in leaving Camp Darby one of the days. I think it was for like the second FTX or like the second 3-day FTX. And this shit was fucking not fun. Not a fun time to cross because it was very steep going down and then very steep coming up. So, you're carrying 100 pounds on your back. Like that shit's hard to maneuver with, even on flat terrain. It's a pain in the ass. Now you have to climb down into this ditch and climb back out. But for whatever reason, our alpha team leader decided we had to cross it. We had 2 women in our alpha company in my second Darby. They were both in the squad. I was in 3rd squad. They were in 2nd squad. So we kind of like lined up behind them. And I remember just one of the nights during the rest and refit day where you kind of take a break, rest and refit, you get a shower. And there's like one shower house on Camp Darby, and that's the only time you're going to shower out there. And they had like a half hour or so to shower, and they took every minute of that half hour to get their hygiene done, while you have a platoon of 50 other guys that are waiting to go in and just use the showers. And they took their sweet ass time. We're all yelling, I'm like, hurry the fuck up, like what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, and then one of them came out running. She was like doing all this crazy hand signals, hand motions. We're just like, just hurry up. Because we had a time hack. You had an hour to get the whole company through the shower. So they took up a good 30 minutes of the time because you can't shower men and women together. This isn't Starship Troopers. And they ended up, taking a lot of the time. And then we had to hurry and get through the showers. One thing about Darby phase is that you don't have access to your duffel bags except for prior to going out on the missions, and then during that rest and refit phase. So you have to kind of pack everything you're going to need. For sleeping, for operations, having the right packing list, the right uniforms and stuff, which was kind of a pain in the ass that we couldn't get access to our duffel bags. But because they're put in these like roll up storage containers, like it wasn't easy access, and everyone's bags looks the same. And it was a huge effort to get into your duffel bag just to get one item. So you had to make sure that you had everything you needed, which led to a little bit of overpacking on my part. I like to be, a little bit more prepared for things. So I had, probably some extra shit that I didn't need to have. You're sleeping like on the rocks. So when I say on the rocks, there's like these gravel areas in between these roll ups, and you're sleeping out there in lines. And when you're not doing the operations, you have to do fire watch. So there's, 2 guys up at all times, maintaining, I guess, security and accountability. So no one sneaks off, no one comes in and takes people's guns. You get used to it after a while. But you get some pretty good sleep on that. And then when it rains, you get authorized to sleep in the planning bays. So you're cramming like 14 to 15 to 17 guys inside these little planning bays. You're moving all the benches out, and you're all sleeping together inside of the planning bay. One of the nights, I slept on the terrain table because I was like, hey, this looks like the best place to sleep. And it was me and the 101st guy. We're like, let's take the terrain table. And we're like, fuck yeah. And I don't know how that thing supported our weight, because those things are old and corroded and rusty, and maybe not rusty, but just beat up and gross. And we slept on the terrain table that night. Darby Phase was fun. The squad size operations, that's kind of where you build your camaraderie with the guys that you're going to be going through the rest of Ranger School with. And like I said, in my second Darby, like I had a really good group of guys, big dick squad. We're all very motivated at helping each other get each other our goes. And that's the biggest thing that I can say about Ranger School throughout all of it is you got to pull your own weight, right? You can't just get your go and then just slack off. You have to continue to help out. You have to continue to support your guys that are in those leadership roles to help them get their go. Because at the end of the day, like, you're all there for one thing. You're all there for your Ranger tab. And you will get peered if you don't pull your weight. Like with the guy, I'm not going to name his name, but the guy that we peered after Darby Phase, after our FDXs, we peered him because he fell asleep constantly on the line. He threatened other people's looks, and then he wasn't, like, we really had to hold his hand through his second look. We had to hold his hand through it and basically do all the work for him because he didn't know what the fuck was going on. So that's kind of why we peered him. So as long as you're like a good dude, you volunteer to carry equipment, you're able to keep yourself awake when it's necessary, and you don't cause any problems for the squad, you'll be fine as far as peers go. Like, just be a good dude, be a helpful guy. Don't be a dickhead. Sometimes you got to be a little bit of a dickhead in leadership to get people to do stuff, because everyone's, tired and hungry and lazy. Like, they don't want to, help with the terrain model, or they don't want to dig the slit trench, or they don't want to carry the machine gun that day. But it's like, you just got to know when to step up and volunteer for kind of shitty things, because when you're in a leadership role, you're going to want your guys to do the same thing. So this, kind of just a little bit of a leadership talk there. So Darby Phase was great. Pretty easy to do, honestly, as long as you have the basic, tactical understanding of kind of what the RIs are looking for and what kind of things they're going to be grading. They're not going to tell you beforehand either. So you just have to be on your A game the whole time you're in leadership role, and you'll be all right. It really wasn't too bad. And then from there, if you pass and you got your go, you'll be going on to Mountain Phase. And we'll talk about Mountain Phase in the next podcast. But hopefully this was good for y'all. Let me know if you want me to dive into more detail. I don't really remember a whole lot from Darby because it was a while ago, and then I did 3 Floridas after, which kind of wiped my brain. But yep, take with that what you will, and I'll talk to you guys this Friday. The episode with my buddy Lockhart, the striker mechanic, will be going up next week. I'm recording that tomorrow, and that should be another really solid one. So I'm excited to share that with y'all. I don't think any other podcast out there that has a Ranger Regiment striker mechanic on it. So he's going to be able to give a unique perspective into the support side of Regiment, and it'll be a really good conversation. He's a really, really great guy, really intelligent. So make sure to tune into that next week as well. So, but that's it for today. I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and stay safe. Take care. We'll talk to you later.